Tell me why you keep moving, little bouquet.
Hey folks, hope you're well. Szeto here, and this week we're going to talk about how the A-frame started to look like the A-frame. It's an exciting one. It's going to be basically, the Tyvecking on the front, followed by the cedar shaking, which basically gives the character and the look of the overall A-frame, and essentially what it's hopefully going to look like for the next 40 to 50 years there. Furthermore, we're going to fire it up and talk about the wood stove and stuff like that as well. I bought a G stove, it's in there, it's working. We're getting up to 20 now with the installation going on. But we'll go through that process and talk about purchasing that unit and putting it in there. So without further ado, here's this week's episode. Hope you enjoy. So before we actually threw up the front end of the cabin, we ended up throwing up some house wrap. The house wrap that we went with was the DuPont Tyvek. It's pretty standard. So honestly, the Tyvek itself was pretty simple. Again, sections were small, so I would actually just, cut or roll out the Tyvek to approximate lengths and stuff like that. I'd cut it out, I'd bring it up, and basically staple it down to where it needed to go. Minimal number of staples, but I'd staple the corners, etc. Then I'd take the carving knife and I'd carve it to where it actually needed to be. And then I followed that up with some tuck tape to essentially tape down any seams so that there just weren't any gaps or anything like that. Of course, we started from our bottom and worked our way up and had a bit of a little overlap between sections there and layers as well. So, everything would go downwards and ensure that, it would fall on the piece of Tyvek that you started with, essentially. After this was done, the building's essentially waterproof, but the whole point of Tyvek is that it's actually supposed to be able to allow water vapor to exit. So makes it work kind of nicely. And from there, it was actually time to basically cedar shake, which was the look essentially that I wanted in the front for how this place would look essentially. And for that, I actually followed these particular steps from the man, the myth, the legend himself, Bob Vila. Bob Vila's videos and the references to Bob Vila as like the master home builder over years has kind of been one of those things. So when you Google or YouTube any of these videos, it seems like his videos kind of come up, and they're pretty sweet actually. A couple things that differed from my process to what you'll see classically with some of these Bob Vila videos or something like that is that it's not just one square area that I'm putting shakes up to, because it's kind of shifting and kind of going upwards and everything like that. The idea of a storyline almost didn't really work for my cabin. Essentially what I did was I would essentially start with the bottom row. I would put down one set of shakes, then I would put down another set of shakes. Those essentially my starter strip there. And I'd put down another set of shakes over top of that. Of course, when you put down shakes on top of one another, I would ensure that the gaps between the cracks were at least 1 inch apart so that you wouldn't have an overlap of gaps right on top of each other or anything like that. And that's pretty much the key to cedar shaking and everything like that there. So, I essentially kind of started that starter strip with 2 sets of shakes directly on top of each other with their gaps covered and things like that. And then I would build upwards from there. I would give it an overhang of about 5.5 inches. I would take my chalk line, chalk it down, row after row, chalk lining that 5.5 inches up, throwing down another set of shakes. Again, with the gaps, we would essentially ensure that, the gaps were at least 1 inch apart, going up row by row there. One thing that was kind of frustrating with this particular section was that I actually bought a Ryobi Airstrike brad nailer with the hopes that it would have made the process really quick. Unfortunately, after the starter row there, because of the cold, we were anywhere from 0 to -10 and stuff like that, and then the next day we were a little even colder than that. It ended up kind of dying on me and not really working. So fortunately, I found a set of galvanized nails in the building, and I was able to just hammer the rest of the shakes away. My neighbor also came through, thank goodness, with a set of nails and stuff as well, and basically got the job done from there. So yeah, really stoked on how it looked. It was basically one big jigsaw puzzle to build up, and it was pretty sweet actually. So furthermore, the one other thing to mention was also our wood stove actually. Of course, to heat the inside, I decided to go with a G stove. It's an outdoor camping stove, not quite meant for a cabin necessarily, but because of how small it was, people were mentioning, you'll be able to heat this place with a candle, and somebody also brought up a G stove. With many outdoor blogs and vlogs and vloggers and Instagram folks that I follow that use this particular stove, I was kind of curious about it, and Norwegian product. I'm a big sucker for Norwegian-made products, so I decided to go with it. All in all, it came out to about $1,000. Should be a price list of, what it all looked like about right here. And yeah, not mad about, having spent $1,000. When you go to Home Depot, it seems like you're pretty much gonna spend about the same for a unit a little bit bigger. So I was happy with what I got. After having my first few fires on there, having cooked some breakfast and dinner on there, I found that it actually burns through things relatively quickly. I'm also bringing up a lot of offcuts from the wood shop and stuff like that to burn. I was also burning Duralogs during the evenings, and I found that actually worked out quite well. Logs were burning for the 3 to 4 hours, and I'd only have to change the log about once or twice over the course of an evening there. With the stove itself, one other thing that I ended up picking up was the SuperVent Cathedral ceiling support kit. This was I essentially just used the chamber that they provided as a tertiary chamber, separating the insulation and the wooden studs from any combustibles coming off the tent protector pipe, which is sort of my secondary insulator, and then of course the original 2.5-inch pipe that came out of the G-stove itself. After marking out where the pipes would go on the roof and stuff, we would essentially cut out the hole in the roof. We would do that with some metal shears that would connect to the impact driver that Rich had. And we would also, of course, use a drill and just kind of drill through the hole, drill through the roof until, we were able to fit the metal shears. And then we were able to cut our section there for our pipe to go through. With the roof cut, we actually ended up using the pipe protector. We put that through a gasket, and it was actually a steep angled gasket. With that particular gasket, we actually also ended up using some high temperature silicone, coated the edges of it, put it down on the roof, and then of course screwed it every inch or so with some screws that essentially matched the color of our roof there. Once that particular pipe protector was in place and the cathedral support was in place, we essentially had the infrastructure ready for the wood stove itself. So next up was really, having that patio stone down, putting the stove on top of there. We connected one section of pipe, connected two 90 degrees angles, so we got some separation away from the walls there, at least 18 inches or so. And then we were able to put the rest of the piping up through the chamber, had a secondary tent protector there, of course, tent protector pipe there that essentially gave sort of a 1-inch separation between the original 2.5 pipe coming off the stove. And then of course we have like extra sets of piping that goes up through the roof. So it comes pretty close to having a 10-foot separation there on the horizontal from the flue of the pipe itself to any sections of the roof itself as well. So, I think I'm gonna eventually add a couple more sections there. Other things that we have to do are also to put some cement board down in and around the area. I've also insulated that particular area with rock wool as opposed to the pink fiberglass. And yeah, all in the name of, essentially keeping it safe and everything like that. The stove worked out really well. Everything in this particular section was great except for that Ryobi airstrike tool. So yeah, we're at a stage now where I've been insulating the inside quite a bit more. It actually got up to a really cozy 20 degrees in the cabin the other day with essentially 3 of the 4 walls insulated. So I'm really excited about that. And yeah, more to come. Gonna be strapping on the inside and putting walls up soon, and a little surprise with a rock sort of climbing wall, bouldering wall that I'm essentially gonna put in a little later on as well. So that's all I've got for now, and much more to come. I think next week actually I'm gonna tally up the costs and finally drop that episode on how much the cabin's costing me and everything like that. So that'll be one to check out. So thanks a lot and all the best. Peace.